Patrick Etheridge, welcome to New Mexico in Focus. Thanks for coming down, and also welcome to Albuquerque.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
So we are talking in this week's show about the media ecosystem and sort of the state of journalism in New Mexico. By the time folks see this interview, you will be about a month into your job as executive editor of the Albuquerque Journal. And we'll get to your plans and vision for the newspaper here in a little bit, but I want to start with where you came from. You have worked at and led newspapers in Nebraska, Kentucky, Indiana, and all sorts of other places. And I wonder how those experiences shaped you as a journalist in particular.
Sure. So I've had ink in my blood since a very young age. You could go back even further, and I was delivering papers when I was 13 and 14, and that was a coveted job for a household, and that's one of those things that my brothers and we kept for a decade in our little small town we grew up in. But then more to the point, got into newspapers as a writer and have always just loved a good story. The meat of journalism, just telling a story, whether it be success in sports, watchdog journalism, or anything else, just there's a thrill and excitement that I get from just a good, meaty story. And that really has never changed. My positions have changed. I've climbed up the ladder, I guess, over the course of 28 years or whatnot. But that still drives me now, just doing good journalism and finding good stories that are important to people.
I relate really strongly to that, actually. I wonder, what were some of those newspapers like in terms of size and circulation and the way they served the communities where they existed?
Sure. So every good newspaper, I think, is somewhat a mirror of the community that it serves. So from that, the communities were vastly different. I started out in a little weekly newspaper as a very young cub reporter back in Nebraska. That's a conservative farming part of the country. And the newspaper really mirrored that. So I went from that to Iowa. Iowa, not as conservative at the time. I went on to be able to cover the Iowa caucuses. Covered the closing of Maytag, which was in Newton, Iowa, which was a huge deal. We saw a town that really thrived on these 3,000 people working in a factory and all losing their jobs within a matter of a year.
Echoes of that in the 2016 presidential election,
yeah,
right?
And just decimated an entire town. And then it really became politicized, right or wrong. Folks used that. But covering the Iowa caucuses was great. And because of Iowa's political makeup, all of the presidential candidates cruised through there, so that was a lot of fun. But then from there, I took a management position on the Iron Range of Minnesota. If you know anything about the Iron Range, it's very much, they call it DFL, is the political driving force there. A completely different dynamic again, and the newspaper reflected that. And really, that's been the case everywhere I've been, and I think it's very true here as well, that a good newspaper is really a good reflection of the community that it serves.
Yeah, and I want to unpack this question a little later in the interview, but let's take a little bit of a stab at it now. This is a state, of course, with a majority Hispanic population, a minority white population. The politics here tend to range from like super deep blue to very weirdly purple. How do you plan to make that reflection that you were just describing happen? How do you do that?
I think the number one way to do that is by hiring good, unbiased journalists. And we all have different backgrounds as journalists, as people, but a good journalist, somebody who really takes it serious, their background doesn't necessarily matter. They approach subject matter unbiased without any preconceived notions. And I really think that we have a team with that kind of dedication to the craft.
How much did you know about Albuquerque? How much did you know about New Mexico? And how much did you know about the Journal when you decided to start to go down this path?
I have to be entirely honest, very little, especially about Albuquerque and New Mexico. Actually, even when I came down here to interview, and it was a few-day process, I didn't get to see the mountains because we started the interview first thing in the morning, and the interview ended and it was dark as I was meeting people, and I was a little disappointed because I didn't get to see the mountains. now I can read everything online. Obviously, I'm a reader based on my career, so I could read about the politics and the demographics, and so I knew it from that standpoint. I was really, honestly, more interested in the journal at the time, because that's where I'm going to spend so much of my time. That's what it was really important to me to meet a lot of the staff and to get to know the history of the journal. So that's probably where I invested all my time.
Gotcha. What sold you on coming here?
Honestly, first and foremost, Bill Lang and what the newspaper has done, the makeup of that paper. I think that Albuquerque and the entire state is so fortunate to have a paper this size, these kind of journalists, and a family that's been that dedicated to serving. I come from corporate newspapers, a long line of them, and still grateful for all the opportunities I've had. But sometimes the papers like that, there's almost a sacrifice sometimes of the product. And here, I feel like the Lang family and the staff as well are very dedicated to a top-notch product. And in a modern era of journalism, sometimes that gets pushed to the side plate, and I don't feel like it has here.
Yeah, I think the notion of a family-owned newspaper is still romantic and attractive in a lot of ways.
It really is.
Digging a little bit deeper, sort of beyond that notion of newspaper as mirror, I want to talk some about your journalism values and philosophies. What kind of, from 30,000 feet or from 2 feet, whichever you prefer, choose your own adventure here. What is a newspaper's role in a community?
I think that that's really multifaceted. I think there's a lot of things that a newspaper has to do for its community. Obviously, there's a watchdog portion to that should never go away. It's, it's key to the invention of newspapers, the creation and the existence of newspapers. We have to be the agency that is watching tax dollars, making sure that our elected officials are being held accountable. That will never change, and I will hold steadfast to that. On a weekly basis, we talk about that. Are there things we need to involve lawyers in? Are there things that we perceive to be going on that are wrong right now with our local officials? And I think that news consumers should always expect that. That will never change. We won't budge on that. But there are other things. I think a newspaper can help celebrate accomplishments in its community, whether that be sports, whether that be pride parades, really, just all the things that happen in a community that make it special and that people in that community should be proud of. I think it's incumbent upon us to help celebrate those things. Now, another portion that I think that newspapers and all media do, but could do better at, is really affect change. I feel like we are, as journalists, influential. And shame on us if we don't use some of that to bring problems to light. It's not necessarily all on our back to make those changes, but to at least make the awareness, to let communities know, let influencers know this is a problem. And I think that that's a thing that all media should do more of. And I would intend for the Journal to do more of that.
The old saw of an informed electorate makes better choices at the ballot box, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So for as long as anybody can remember, the Journal has positioned itself as a newspaper of record. Sort of the New York Times model of all the news that's fit to print, right? But on a local scale. Should readers going forward expect that of the Journal, or do you have a different idea in mind for that idea of if it happened, it didn't really happen unless it went in the Journal? Is that what we're going to see going forward?
So I appreciate the question, because honestly, that's something that we've discussed, we've pondered, and not to great detail yet because I've only been here for a minute, but very true. I mean, we've talked about, do our readers expect us to be the state newspaper that reports on things that are happening 3 hours away, but it's still New Mexico? And I think the answer is yes. We will continue to do that because I think our readers expect it, and it's important. I don't think that we can always rely on, well, somebody will pick that up. At some point, you just have to do it yourself to make sure that readers remain informed. However, it's equally important to me that we are a community newspaper. I don't want there to be news happening in Albuquerque that we miss because we're covering something 3 hours away. So there's a fine line there, and I can't tell you that I have that all figured out yet, but I want to be both.
That's really encouraging to hear. Yeah. Going a little bit more into the weeds here, and I appreciate your willingness to engage in some of this. Your two predecessors in the executive editor job, Karen Moses and Kent Walls. First of all, full disclosure, this does not come as a galloping shock to any of our viewers. I worked at the Journal from 2003 to 2013. It's still a really important institution to me in a lot of ways. So fair game for me to just say that out loud. Anyway, Kent and Karen both were very hands-on editors. In particular, for stuff that went in the A section of the newspaper, they had their hands-on copy. I wonder, and again, I know you've only been there a month, what kind of editor should we expect for you to be from that perspective? Do you plan on having your hands in the pie?
So, again, a great question. That's something that I've been having a lot of discussions with my staff, even though I've only been here for a bit, because I don't take that approach. I don't believe that the executive editor is necessarily best served as a line editor on a daily basis. I think that I have some very qualified journalists, a number of very qualified journalists who have served this newspaper and our readers for a very long time and are more than capable of doing a lot of that. I see myself more as coming up with the direction that we're going to go, saying that this is where we're going to go, and then really I'd like to empower my staff. I've never worked with a group of journalists as skilled as this, as experienced as this, and as capable as they are. So that's really what we've been talking a lot about in my first few weeks here, is just, I trust you. You know what to do. At this point, you know what to do more than I do. I've only been here for a minute. I'm still learning the processes, and I'm still learning the names of the people in the newsroom, frankly. Yeah. But I would expect in the coming months that for my staff to hopefully feel very empowered and know that I'm not going to be looking over their shoulder for all those details. I think that as the modern era of journalism dictates we do less with more, it's going to be very important that they know they have the ability to go out on their own and do more of the things that they're qualified to do. And I think we have to learn to operate more efficiently that way, because our number one priority will always remain good journalism, keeping meat on the bone, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So the best way to do that is to be efficient.
One other question about process. And going back to, again, both of your two predecessors, they both had a tremendous amount of involvement, both in content on the editorial pages, including staff editorials, and in the news operation. I wonder your thoughts on that philosophically. Do you plan to have more of kind of that traditional separation of church and state, or do you see yourself kind of overseeing both aspects of the operation, opinion and news both?
So I do. I will serve on our editorial board. I will be part of that process on a regular basis. And in terms of content, I'm really looking forward to starting to write a regular column of some sort. That's not all going to be hard news. Let's be honest. A lot of this, especially as I get acclimated and introduced to the area, there's probably going to be a lot of me writing about just how amazed I am at some of the Albuquerque-isms and things that are just brand new to me. Mm-hmm. But I think, eventually you're going to probably see me opine a bit more. And I believe that myself or any other journalist worth their mud can share an opinion and still also be unbiased when it comes to the news side. I think that separation is possible.